Okay, so should I look in the camera? Probably should.
Hello, podcast listeners.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Professor, for helping with the intro.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Office Hours podcast. Now, I'm very excited to tell you.
Is there a musical theme for the podcast?
No, unfortunately not. Maybe you can make some background noises if you want to. Because, dear listeners, Professor Harvey, my guest today, was actually a rock star back in his day.
I was a rock star.
Tell us more about it.
I was in a band called Plume in the 90s. We wrote original songs. We had one CD, when CDs were CDs, things, called God Bless Men and Their Rockets. And we had a chick singer. It was okay to say chick singer at that time. But I played guitar. It was Beth the singer who wrote and played keyboards and flute. And Al the bass player. And I'm forgetting the drummer's name because he exploded.
Maybe that's why you split.
No, that's not why we split. But we played local clubs in Chicago, and got pretty big. But this is during the '90s when there was a kind of a signing frenzy. We kind of just missed the signing frenzy. But I don't know if you're familiar with a band called Veruca Salt or Urge Overkill, or I bet you heard of these guys, Smashing Pumpkins. Okay, one person is nodding their head. But they were big in the 90s, but the Chicago music scene was pretty awful, to be honest. And I didn't like being a part of it. I had hair down to here. I have a picture that I can show you that's proof of this. But, it was really competitive and cutthroat. And it was a lot of work. And it was fun, but I'll go to the Rock Jam Club and let them do the rock jamming for me.
So you never had a dream of being a rock star?
Oh, I did, absolutely. But the people to make it in that business, oh my God, you gotta work your ass off, and you gotta schmooze your ass off. So it's not just talent; it's so much. And being in the right place at the right time, and it was not fun.
Now, Professor, because we're filming this on the lovely day of February the 14th.
Yeah, Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day. Oh, Professor, I have a joke. I have a dad joke for you.
Okay. I don't have any kids.
Oh. Nevertheless, I don't have any kids. I'm 19 years old and I enjoy dad jokes.
Yes.
So, dear listeners, whether you're celebrating Valentine's Day or Wine Day, you should just have fun, because why not?
Okay.
Just a pun.
Oh, it is a pun. That's a fun pun.
Yeah.
Fun pun.
Thank you.
For all the lovers out there.
Please don't leave this podcast. Please. I promise it's going to get interesting.
For all the lovers out there, happy Valentine's Day. For all the people, for all the lonely hearts, it'll happen for you. It's just not this year, just not this time, right? Be patient. That special someone is out there waiting for you. They can't wait to meet you. Just be ready.
Let's talk about the psychology of love.
Yes, let's talk about the psychology of love. So I use this in research methods quite a lot, and I ask my students, Can you study love scientifically? Can you measure love?
We talked about this.
We did.
Yes.
We did. And students will usually like, no. And then some people say, well, and I'll ask, well, how can you tell when two people are in love? You can't tell? Oh, yeah, we can tell. Okay, what do? And then they start saying, well, they gaze in each other's eyes a lot. Great. And they're affectionate with each other. Great. And they say nice things. And they say it in a specific tone of voice. Oh, I love you too. Mm-hmm. Right? And so so there are things. And they think about them all the time. And they do nice things and for each other. And they care about each other. And maybe they've been together for a long time. And it's like, oh, so you can measure love. So we kind of could put all those things together. Are we measuring love? Yeah, I would say so. And marriage psychologists, people who study family systems, they can look at people and they can see how they interact with each other, and they can predict with pretty good accuracy, like 80% of the time, whether or not people are going to stay together or be divorced, just by how people talk to each other. So, it's not magical. Finding that right person's, it's kind of a lottery. So if you don't have good luck, don't give up, just like the songs say. Get out there and keep trying, because that will increase your odds, because it really is a numbers game. And, it'll happen if it's meant to be. And then again, we've talked a lot about self-acceptance. If you're going to be by yourself, be okay to be by yourself. Not everybody is destined to, get married, have kids, or, be paired off with somebody. But I do say, as an anxiously attached person, love is really nice. It's a nice completion to a puzzle piece, especially if you have anxious attachment. And so, I'm a little sad that I haven't found anybody yet, but
it'll happen.
Maybe. Maybe. I've been deliberately out of the game for quite a while.
Get back in, because remember what you said 2 minutes ago?
All right.
It's out there waiting for you.
Okay.
A 19-year-old student told you to, so do
All
it.
right. Okay.
Why don't you tell me more about this rock star experience of yours?
Well, I'm the youngest of 8 kids, all boys. And so there's very little good I can say about that, except for the fact that, thank God, all of my older brothers had good taste in music. And so from a very early age, I remember my earliest memories were in a Beatle wig and jumping up and down and playing a tennis racket on one of my brother's beds. So that was 1964. I was 3 years old. And from there on, they just had really great taste in music. So I always loved music. And all my older brothers, they were jocks, and I was not going to be a jock, but I wanted to do something with people. And the only thing I asked for, I think when I was 15 or 16, I asked for and got a guitar, and didn't know how to play it for first couple of years. And so I met these guys in high school, and they taught me how to play electric guitar, and joined my first band in high school.
Professor, being surrounded by 7 jocks, how did you maintain your identity as a rock star? The first thing we learn in social psychology is how the group influences you, and you sort of melt into that identity. How did you stay different?
There is good research on birth order, and almost always the youngest, generally, out of 2 or 3, the youngest kind of goes their own way, because they have other examples to look at older siblings. And to do that, my mom had our high school graduation photos in the basement, and they were all 8 of us, and so it started with crew cuts in black and white. It was in the 50s, and then gradually getting in color. Then there's me with hair down to here, and so you be the rebel. My dad used to tell me that I caused them more trouble than all the other 7 boys combined.
How come?
Because I hung out with the rockers and the stoners, and I stayed out late and drank and just did rock and roll stuff.
So they were probably less strict with you than with the other.
Yeah, playing baseball compared to, doing drugs and hanging out with stoners, they would much rather have a baseball player.
How did growing up with 7 siblings shape you in the person that you are?
It made me comfortable being around people, but not necessarily wanting to interact with people. And so I am totally comfortable being by myself, but I don't mind being by myself around other people. So very often 9 times out of 10 in Blagoevgrad, I'll be having dinner by myself, and it'll be in a big crowded restaurant, and I'll be watching my Netflix on my phone and be surrounded by other people. And people are interesting, but I don't necessarily want to hang around them or interact with them. That's the introvert side of me. I'm fine being on my own. But I'm comfortable being around large numbers of people. It doesn't make me nervous. And I used to perform in front of large numbers of people. And it was nervous. I would be nervous, but it was not like intolerable. So I was always used to people being around, but I didn't necessarily have to interact with them, which was fine. My brothers didn't necessarily want to interact with me because I was the littlest. I was the baby.
But Professor, being on one's own is such an important skill. How do we learn how to be comfortable with our own self? I think people go through entire lifetimes trying to figure that out.
Yeah, well, we talk about this in Psych 101. I try to make
Not
this...
yet.
I've said this from the very beginning. My goal is for you to learn about yourself and to learn about how you interact with other people, and then that plus, right? That plus sign in between. And I think the most important skill that you can learn as a person, and especially psychology can help you with this, is just to learn about yourself and to accept yourself. We all have strengths. We all have weaknesses. You need to learn what those things are. And as 20-year-olds, and I think you guys are the best 19, 20, 21-year-olds I've ever met in my entire life. You guys are amazing.
Why is that so?
Because you come from all over the world. You are, you're from middle-income countries, developing countries, and so you have to work very hard for everything that you've achieved. You're doing things in multiple languages, which is unfucking believable. It's incredible, right? And so, America has a huge middle class. And so a lot of people, they grow up in different places. And yes, we have very poor people. Yes, we have rich people. But the 80% of the population in the United States is middle class. That's not what it's like here. And so you guys have had to work very hard for what you have from North Macedonia to get here, from Georgia, from Uzbekistan, from Kazakhstan, all the places. You get the best students from those places coming here, and you get along, and you get to know each other. And it's diverse in a way that's very different. When Americans think of diversity, we think of different colors and ethnicities. Here, you're just from different places all over the world, and you're just smart, and you're hungry, and there's a little infectiousness that comes with that is really amazing and inspiring for me. That's how I find you guys. I don't know how you find us, but you don't have to answer that.
How do we influence you? For example, when you go into a room of full, bright young students who are hungry for knowledge, how does that inspire you? What does it make you do outside of the classroom?
Well, it makes me ask, what is this thing like in your country? So I'm teaching a class in personality theory now. And it's a big class. It's my biggest class I've ever taught. It's 37 students. And so I've let in the maximum amount of people I can let in. And there's people from all over the world. So what does extroversion mean to you in Albania, to you in Kazakhstan, to you in Bulgaria? And then me as an American, right? And so you always have these cultural things happening in all classes, even in our Psych 101 class. We have, I forget how many, but it's 8 or 9 different ethnicities, countries represented. And so for me, as a psychologist, this is like gold dropping from the sky. And you have to use that. And I feel really privileged teaching psychology because you have psychology everywhere you go, right? It's a little different than literature. It's a little different than economics. So it's certainly different than stats. You can pull those things into your life, but not in the same way that psychology is. And so I use that. And I've also have improv training. I'm from Chicago, and improv training tells you, use what's right in front of you. Use what you have. And what's always in front of me right now is you students. And if I know you're from North Macedonia, if I know you're from Albania, if I know you're from this, I'm going to ask you, what is this like in your place? And we have really good rapport in Psych 101. It happened very, very quickly. It doesn't happen all the time. And so when students sort of understand that and we all kind of on the same wavelength, we can usually get some really good concepts out. And that's how I use it. That's what I get from you guys.
You mentioned the improv classes. Can you tell me something more about it? How did it come about? And then I want to also get to the importance of improv comedy and how to... Let's start there and then I'll follow up.
So improv, I'm from Chicago. I grew up in Joliet, which is outside of Chicago, but I lived in Chicago for a long time. And I got my Ph.D. late in life. Most of my life, I worked in the IT world.
Really?
For almost 20 years, I worked in IT. And the last 10 years of my career in IT was for an investment bank, a global investment bank that was based in Switzerland, but they had a derivatives office in Chicago. And I worked there for 10 years. And Chicago is the improv capital of the world. It was not invented there, but a lot of the more noteworthy schools were there. And so when I went back to university to finish my bachelor's and then go on to my PhD, working on your PhD is a lonely, miserable sort of experience. But I've been seeing improv shows in Chicago since the 90s. And they were just great. And I remember being really miserable sitting on a bus in Chicago working on my dissertation. I looked up and I saw an advertisement for Second City, which is a big improv theater, and they said, take classes. And I said, oh my God, why didn't I think of this? And so I started taking improv classes just to find something fun to do while I was doing my dissertation. And I'm a community psychologist. And community psychology is all about how groups of people help and influence each other to improve well-being. And I very quickly saw the parallels of an improv group and how they work to help support each other and well-being and connection.
And create a happier nation.
And create or even just a happier room of people for an hour and a half or so.
That can then go into their homes and make another group of people happy.
Yeah.
Wow.
When you're miserable, you kind of bring everyone else down. When you're happy, you tend to kind of want to share it.
Exactly.
And so it became sort of a practical thing at first, and then after a while it became really something that I loved and wanted to learn more about. But everybody who took improv classes in Chicago, they were in their 20s. You know, they've been doing improv since they were in college. And so you have an old guy like me coming to shows and being in classes. And I had no relationship. I was just doing my dissertation. And people started talking to me. And they found out I was a psychology student. I study communities, and my specialty is how people recover from addictions. And I just got to know them, and they got to know me, and to the point where one of the guys in the improv performance community came to my dissertation defense. And he was a very talkative guy. This guy named Joey Romaine, gigantic mass of red hair and a beard. And he can't stop talking. I said, Joey, you can come to my dissertation defense, but you can't talk. And it'll be like for an hour. Can you do that? And he's like, I'll try. And he did. And then I got my PhD. I got my dissertation defended, and he took me out for pancakes. And then I went to a show that night, and I had my suit on for my dissertation. And I walked into the improv theater, and everyone started going, Dr. Ron. Dr. Ron. So everybody and everyone in Chicago knows me as Dr. Ron.
Can you bring something from those improv classes here in this room?
There's an improv theater club here.
Oh, tell us more about it.
At AUBG. It was founded right before the pandemic in 2018. Students heard about it and they wanted to learn about improv, so we started meeting. And then in spring of 2018, or maybe even it couldn't have been spring of 2019. It had to be spring of 2018. The students did a show in the big theater, and we did a portion for faculty called PowerPoint Karaoke, where some faculty got to volunteer, and the rules of the game was you are going to give a PowerPoint presentation about a topic you know nothing about, and you're only going to know the title the moment you click on it. And you don't know what's going to be on the next slide, but you have to justify it. And there was four AUBG professors, and it's judged. and you do a scorecard of how well you make it coherent and stuff like that.
How many people are in the audience?
There was about 100 people in the
What?
audience, and it was hilarious. And
I bet it wasn't for the professors.
Professor Clark won that competition.
Did he?
He was great.
In fact, he's the next guest. You just gave me.
Oh, that's great.
Great
Ask him
material.
about PowerPoint karaoke. But that was the only show we did. The students did a great job doing a short form show, and then the pandemic happened, and we didn't do anything. So just this past in the fall semester of 2022, we started to revive the club again, and now they meet every Wednesday at 7:30 in the post bank room, and we move. And we just played super, super, super dumb games for an hour and 15 minutes or so.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm gonna join that room from
Do
next
it.
week.
It's great.
No, actually from tomorrow. I want to know. Okay, I want to get something in the podcast about this improv thing. Can you give me some of the basic principles about improv comedy? What is it that you do first? How do you overcome that fear of embarrassing yourself in front of a room full of people?
Well, I was really fortunate. I had really, really great teachers in Chicago. And now that I moved here, I've gone to teachers in Europe, people from all over the world. The basics of improv is this. It's a performance. It's a theatrical performance where there's no script, there's no set, there's no characters. Very little or nothing is planned beforehand. You just react to the other person.
Yeah.
Right. But we do this all the time, right? When you walk from between buildings and someone comes up to you and says something, you don't have something prepared. All you have to do is react to them. And so we try, and children kind of do this naturally. They just kind of play and react to each other. Children are actually really bad improvisers, however, but they have that sense of play. And so the thing that we sort of forget as adults is how to play and have fun with each other, just a little teasing with each other, right? And so there's certain guidelines for improv that help you do this a little bit more easily. One is the shorthand is called yes and. So you say something to me about anything, and I will say yes to whatever you're saying.
And you continue the story. I've seen this on TikTok.
Yeah, and add something to that, right? I got you a gift.
Yes, and I really think this baby is beautiful.
It really is a baby, and I mean, for a baby crocodile, it's very beautiful. But I heard that you were having mouse problems in your house, and this baby crocodile will take care of those mouse problems. But you should name it. You should name it. What would you name a baby crocodile?
Toby.
That's a great name for a baby crocodile.
I know, right?
Because it's so opposite of what a crocodile kind of is.
The vibe that a crocodile gives is definitely not Toby.
Yep.
It's going to be great for my snake.
Oh,
Named
yes.
Nikki. Yeah,
Oh.
she's going to love it.
Or hate it, or one of the two. So, I mean,
Wow.
So you just say yes, and you continue the conversation, and you just react to each other. Mm-hmm. And that's...
What if it's not funny? What if...
It's not supposed to be funny. It has
What
just
is
to
the
be...
purpose of it? I thought the purpose of improv comedy is for you to just be funny, and it's stressful that way.
Yeah, so we try... I was taught, yes, you want to be funny, but don't try to be funny. The funniness that comes out of most improv in most situations for the audience is the sense of surprise that the two improvisers experience, and they're surprised as well. Or if you're playing a character and you're playing a relationship, people will laugh because they know it's being made up on the spot, and they're tense. And then when they realize, oh, everything's okay, they're okay, the actors are okay, and then they laugh just out of relief. And then others, sometimes the audience will laugh because, there'll be a couple and, somebody's really worried about something stupid. And they laugh because they are that person or they know that person. And they laugh because they just recognize, oh, God, yeah, I've been that person. We're just worried about absolutely nothing. And it feels good to have that recognition and to just laugh about it. So That's what makes it funny. Sometimes it's genuinely funny and clever, but most of the time, if you try to be funny and clever, it falls flat.
True, true. Now, in our Psych 101 modules, you posted an article called Why Improv Has Made Me a Better Scientist.
Yeah.
And I read it, and I wanted to ask, how has it made you a better scientist, or maybe a better human being, or what has it taught you about life?
There's a lot of ways of describing improv, but the one that I find most helpful for me is it's mindfulness out loud. So mindfulness is just being aware of what's happening in the moment, right? And I do meditate. I try to do it every day. And, you're just being mindful of what's going on in your body, what's going on in your thoughts, what's going on with your emotions. But if you're doing it out loud, what does that mean? It means I have to be aware of what's happening around me, and aware that you're looking at me, and aware that you're nodding, and aware that you look interested, and aware of, and maybe at some point you've narrowed your eyes a little bit, and so you're thinking about something, and to the point where maybe you are going for the next question, and so you glance at the computer and you're ready for that. And
wow,
stuff.
you do notice everything.
So
wow.
it's mindfulness out loud, and saying that in my head, and then just reacting to it. And I can choose to react to it in a million different ways, just like every human being can, and emphasize it. And so it's just this nice feeling of being in the moment and connecting to people, which is, that's the most important thing that we have as human beings, is just connecting to people.
Isn't this level of mindfulness and of awareness and noticing a bit discouraging at times? Because the more you know, blissful ignorance. And so when you're this aware of how people act and you notice these little cues, aren't you like, she's not listening anymore, that's it, and you get discouraged? You know what?
The thing that being a psychologist has taught me is that human beings, it's taught me to be very human about how people are and failings. And especially when you take social psychology, you learn that, human beings have done really horrible things. But it's not because they're horrible people, it's because they were put in horrible situations. And most people, most of the time, would have done pretty much the same thing. The opposite is also true. We're seeing heroic things happening right now all over the world, in Turkey and Syria, people working to save people. That's also part of the human condition. So it's all part of the human condition.
Okay. That's beautiful.
That's something that comes later on in life.
So what I hear you saying is that nurture has a big part.
Yes.
In shaping a person.
Yes.
Do you really think that there are no bad people? Only bad?
Oh, no, I think there are definitely bad people. Definitely bad people who, should be avoided, ostracized, shamed. I have no problem with shame. And pointed out for the rotten, shitty people that they are. And, and most of those people are so terrible, they don't even think that they're terrible. Even the Nazis knew that they were terrible. They hid what they were trying to do, and they burned their papers. Other people just announce it proudly.
But does being a psychologist make you more understanding of their condition and being like, oh, well, maybe they were put through this situation and that situation?
Yeah, my training as a community psychologist, the most important word that you learn in community psychology is context. People exist in a specific context, in a specific time, in a specific thing. It's not just the individual. It's everything that happened to them, around them, the systems they grew up with, the family systems, the culture, the time in history. All of that is very influential on who we are and how we react to the world. It doesn't mean you excuse people. What it does mean is that you have to understand people where they are. Not where you'd like them to be, but where they are. And when I work with people with addictions. I have not met anyone who has an addiction, who's recovered from an addiction, is still in an addiction, who did not think, I can handle this. I can handle this. I'm not going to get addicted. I can handle this. Everybody says that. Everybody thinks that. That's part of the nature of addictions. And, how they got there is unique for every single person. I know some people are very contemptuous of people with addictions, but once you understand that, you can't say, you dumbass, you knew what you were getting into. It's not true. It's just not true.
And so how does one get out of it?
Of addiction? Well, it's a long learning process, and so it's a long unlearning process. And you need to replace it with other things. You need to learn other things. You need to hang around other people who are doing maybe things that are a little bit healthier, who want you to succeed. That's the other thing that's really special about the improv community, and it's also special about the addiction recovery community, is that everybody wants you to succeed. Everybody wants you to get better. Everybody wants you to be funny. Everyone wants you to be a happy, healthy person. And there's just not very many communities on earth that are like that. And so, yeah, it's this long unlearning process. People don't become addicted overnight. It takes a long learning process of coping and learning things that work, and you have to just learn other things to replace those. And it depends. It really also depends on the drug. You can drink successfully. I'm making air quotes for the podcast listeners. You can drink successfully for 25 or 30 years before it really starts to create big problems health-wise in your life. It's a long time to learn something, and it takes a tremendous long time to unlearn it. Whereas heroin, you can't be a quote-unquote successful heroin user for 25 years. It's going to drag you down into the bottom, in 2 or 3 years. Usually that happens if you're young, in your early 20s. You have a long time to unlearn that and to replace it with something more healthy if it doesn't kill you. That's the other thing. Heroin is just much more deadly as a drug. And so there's different sort of life trajectories, both socially and chemically, for the different substances that take on. There's a great book called The Natural History of Alcoholism, and it's about this long sort of trajectory that alcohol takes, and that's partially what makes it very destructive.
Professor, I even asked this in class, but in class I used the term hardwired, and then I realized that hardwired is not what it didn't mean what I thought it did.
But it's a shorthand. I understand what you mean.
So I want to address it in a podcast too. How is addiction different than just a very integrated habit in your mind that leaves a trace in your brain? Because I just read this book, The Power of Habit, and a habit just leaves a mark on your brain that cannot be erased. It can only be replaced. So, for example, smoking habits.
Did you write about myelin sheaths?
Yes, it was me.
Yes. So I just finished grading them, and
what did I get?
You got a 5 out of 5. But you said you were very impressed that the more often you use a neuron, the thicker the myelin sheath is. Why? To make sure that the electrical signals travel through the axon faster. That's what establishing habits do. So it's very quick, don't have to think about it, very efficient, right? But at first, it takes a long time. You're building those connections, you're building the myelin sheaths, you're making your neurons, again, stronger. And so that's a habit. Addictions are distinguished by the fact that it has adverse consequences, and you do it anyway. You think more and more about getting the substance. It takes up more and more of your time and economic resources and thoughts, and you start to...
And neurotransmitters, right?
And it affects your neurotransmitters as you're doing it, but if you're not doing it, you're thinking about getting it. And I used to be a smoker, so I know what it's like. When you're not smoking, if anyone in this room smokes, it's about time. I've had my last cigarette about an hour ago, and now you're thinking about smoking, and you're thinking about how long is this guy going to talk before I can go out and have my cigarette? And so you're thinking about this other thing. That's what makes it different than a habit. You start to lose relationships, and then there's more severe consequences, and you still do it. That's what makes it different than being addicted to potatoes.
Or to sweets after
or
meals.
to being addicted to sweets.
But you think about them as well, though.
Yeah, but not in the same way. You don't think about robbing your grandmother in order to get sweets.
But you do about smoking?
You do. If you're a smoker like me, and at the end of my smoking, I was smoking 3 packs a day. You do what's called the cigarette pack shake. It's the end of the night. You're heading home. You shake your cigarettes. If you can feel that there's not very many cigarettes in there, you know, shit, I got to go to the store because I'm not going to wake up and only have 2 cigarettes and then have to go out and you plan your day around smoking. Cigarettes. And that's what it's like to be an addict. You have to plan around your day because you don't want to be without that drug. It's just different than sweets.
Yeah, I get it now. When was your last cigarette, Professor?
It was September something of 2000. I have a picture of me smoking my last cigarette. I knew it was going to be my last cigarette. And I just kept this picture with me, and I think I named it something. I won't take up your time, but it was...
it's okay.
But yeah, it was on a specific day. I knew that I had to give up smoking. It was going to be time. And so I bought cigarettes by the carton, and I said, I'm just going to smoke to my last cigarette, and then I'm going to go to bed. It'll probably be at the end of the day. And then the next morning I'll put on a patch, because that's a nicotine patch.
You've mentioned it in class, but I've never heard of that.
Yeah, nicotine replacement, nicotine lozenges, nicotine gum. The reason you smoke is because your body needs nicotine.
So what year was it? You didn't tell me?
I think it was 2003.
So 20 years no smoking.
Yeah, 20 years no smoking.
You just told me that you went from
3 packs of cigarettes to
For the
nothing.
listeners, we knocked on the table.
On the top.
Wood. Superstitions. What do you have to say about that, Professor?
I should knock on the bottom. That's what depends on what the devil hears, I think. I never get those straight.
So you went from thinking about cigarettes all the time and having 3 packs a day to one day saying it's going to be my last one, and continuing for 20 years.
Well, no, I knew it was time to smoke, so I sort of asked the universe, please make me be willing to give this up. Because if you're a smoker, I don't know if there's any smokers in here, you love smoking. Oh my God, smoking is so great. It's the best thing in the world, except when it's the worst thing in the world, right? And so I spent a year saying, just please make me be willing to give up smoking. Then I was willing to give up smoking. And then I spent
How come?
Because it was time, right? When you're in your 40s and you start to see the wrinkles and you know smoking is bad for your skin and you know that it's going to start, making, you see older people who are just hacking and coughing, and it's like, I don't want it to be that. And I just looked at the cigarette and I said, you are a nicotine delivery device. That's the only reason. Yes, I like
all the social
things and stuff like that. But the reason I smoke is because you, and I'm pointing to my imaginary cigarette in my fingers, you are a nicotine delivery device. That is why I am really in a bad mood at the end of a long flight. That's why I'm in a bad mood if I can't smoke. It's because I need nicotine. And so I spent a year just kind of saying that. And I've been on long intercontinental flights where you couldn't smoke, and I would chew on nicotine gum. And guess what happened? I didn't want to smoke because I had nicotine.
But doesn't it have the same effect? Isn't the nicotine...
Oh, no. That's not the nicotine's not the harmful thing. It's the tars and it's the smoke that really brings you down. It's not the nicotine. And
Do you still use nicotine patches, or did you give up on them?
No, I gave up on those. I used the patch and gum for about 2 months, and I'd read up about this. Nicotine gets absorbed in your fat, and so even when you're not taking nicotine gum or nicotine patch, your fat is still leaching nicotine, And that takes anywhere from 5 to 7 months for it to get out of your fat. And you look at the literature and it looks at when people relapse, and it's at the 5 to 7 month range, because that's when you are going absolutely cold turkey, because you're no longer getting nicotine leaching from your fat. And then people get cravings again, and then they smoke. And I knew this because I'm a scientist. And so I kept nicotine gum with me, and yeah, I had cravings at 6 months, and I popped a couple nicotine gums in, got through it. It was fine.
Okay, so
nicotine replacement is a great way. I'm not so sure about vaping. I haven't kept up on the literature on vaping, but nicotine replacement is by far, and hanging around different people and doing more healthier things is those are the two most powerful ways to quit smoking. This bullshit about willpower and quitting cold turkey and making it hard for yourself is the dumbest, worst way to quit smoking.
So it's
Sorry,
all about...
I said dumb. Nobody's dumb.
So the most important thing is removing the cues from the environment.
No, it's getting...
And also the nicotine patches,
the nicotine. And cues from the environment, being aware of those cues, mindfulness, right? For me, it was always transitional things coming from inside to outside, big trigger, going from the outside of being on a bus, going outside of a bus. Anything going from inside to outside was a big trigger. Because what's the first thing you do? You're outside. I can smoke.
I can smoke, yeah. Not in those inside smoking cafes, which I hate, by the way.
Yeah. I hate the vaping people inside.
That's even worse now.
It's not worse, but it's annoying.
It smells.
Why would they smoke inside? Like burnt hair.
Exactly.
I'm in a restaurant and somebody's vaping next to me. It's like, thanks for making the whole restaurant and my food taste like burnt hair.
Yeah. So, dear listeners,
Asshole.
If you're vaping or smoking IQOS in a restaurant, please don't.
Please don't.
Or if you're smoking in general, please don't.
Do it outside.
Yeah. Or just get a nicotine patch and quit.
Nicotine patch, nicotine gum, nicotine lozenges.
Professor, was your smoking addiction? Should I call it addiction?
It is an addiction, for sure. Okay.
Was your smoking addiction the reason why you pursued a Ph.D. in addiction and drugs?
No, I pursued a Ph.D. in addiction and drugs because my father was an alcoholic. He died sober at the age of 93. He died 56 years sober. But 6 of his 8 kids were born out of a whiskey bottle. I had older brothers who died from addictions. So it kind of runs in my family. And I initially started my PhD studies studying social psychology. And because I wanted to study sort of international type stuff. And social psychology was all about cultural differences. And I quickly learned that social psychology is boring for me. And all the cool stuff, all the coolest studies in psychology, the Milgram experiment, all those studies were done by social psychologists. All that has been done. But I found out of this other field called community psychology, which is all about group behavior, but it was all about international stuff, and it was all about health and well-being. And I started to study recovery groups. And so then I started studying recovery homes in the United States, and it all just kind of came together as the thing that I should switch to. And so I switched to studying community psychology because of family background. And it's great. It's really cool and interesting, very fulfilling, very interesting stuff.
So now is it community psychology or?
Community psychology.
And where's addiction in that?
Addiction.
Is it like a sub?
Well, the nice thing about community psychology is you study any community of people.
And so it's the
community bit of how groups of people work together for and how they exist together, health and well-being. So community psychologists, it's kind of a strength and a weakness at the same time. They study any large group of people and how they interact with the larger community to enhance well-being. So it can be anything from studying inner city kids in a school in Chicago and how they form communities and how you can help them succeed, to self-help groups, to the most interesting example. I had a cohort at my university at DePaul in Chicago. I got my Ph.D. in 2014. She studied Chilean refugees who happened to settle in Chicago. And if you understand the history of Chile, it was under a dictatorship, military dictatorship of Pinochet for many years. And then after Pinochet collapsed in the, I think, the late 90s, a lot of them came to the United States. But there were people who came to the United States who were on the Pinochet side, who were torturers, and the victims of these groups who also came to Chicago. And they all formed the same Chilean community. And so my colleague studied community psychology, and she wanted to know how these communities who are diametrically opposed to each other, in fact sworn enemies, how they formed one community in Chicago. It was very, very interesting stuff. So you can study sort of any sort of group of people in any sort of group context. So I have a friend of mine, he's Bulgarian. I helped him get to the United States when I was a grad student, and he got his Ph.D. in community psychology at Vanderbilt, and now he's back in Varna, and he's studying how the different protest movements proliferate through Bulgaria, how they cooperate, how they don't cooperate, and how they use social media to get the word out about forming different communities online.
What if we study the community at AUBG?
Well, it's a very interesting group of people to study because it's, 30, 40 different countries.
What have you observed, for example?
The good things is that people are pretty open and tolerant and accepting here. You've got trans students now, you've got gay students, openly gay students, you've got people who are very, traditional. You have wide open stuff. You have, blue hair, green hair, tattoos, piercings, et cetera, and that's really nice to see. You see people get together and, speak English. When they speak English, I know that there is a mix of ethnicities in that group, because otherwise you'd be speaking Georgian or Macedonian or whatever. And so it's really nice to see. It's really nice to see the friendships that form the communities. I also see when people venture out, how the townspeople reacts, and it's usually either very good or very bad. And we saw that a couple years ago with LGBTQ clubs meeting, and there was local protests about this, and we had to move students and be aware of their safety. Unfortunately, we've seen some of the Central Asian and Asian students get hassled because of how they look, and it just shows that we are our own little bubble of high tolerance or higher tolerance that doesn't necessarily exist. But are we influencing Bulgaria? I hope so. I think so. That's a very, very pithy answer to a very complex question. But that's the good and the bad that I've seen. And again, you students are, among the best people I've ever met in my life, because of how you don't have to be like this, and yet you are. There's no rules. I think there probably is a rule saying don't be a jerk, and don't hassle people. But you guys have found that, and you've made this place like this. And I'm sure that there's words that get exchanged, and I'm sure that it's not as rosy as I think it is. But I think for the most part, I'm very impressed with how well you guys get along.
Now, Professor, in this bubble of getting to know yourself in these years that are crucial for development, as you say in class, before 25,
before your big, beautiful, gorgeous frontal lobes
stop developing.
Well, they're the last.
Freeze forever.
They're the last. They don't freeze forever. They're the last things that develop neurologically, and so they're, by definition, they're the things that are most shaped by experience. The things that are least shaped by experience neurologically, your brainstem, there's not very much change that's going on with that. And so it's everything in between, from your brainstem to your frontal lobes.
Exactly. So what advice would you give us students in this most vulnerable times when we're supposed to get to know ourselves, to choose the people around us, to establish a healthy relationship with ourselves?
That's a really good question.
Thank you. This is the best compliment anybody can give to an interviewer.
No, and it's I've thought a lot about this in the 7 years that I've been here, and I think get to know yourself as well as you possibly can, and just know that you're going to learn things that you like about yourself, and you're going to learn things that you don't like about yourself. And it's all part of the same thing. And don't try too hard to be something that you're not. And so, and I use this example in personality theory, I use this in Psych 101. If you're an introvert, most of the time, especially in the United States, you're surrounded by people who are mostly extroverts. And I ask students all the time, they still say this in personality theory, I feel so bad for the extroverts say this, I feel so bad for the introverts. They're so lonely and sad. And what they really mean is that being an extrovert is awesome. We're surrounded by people all the time because you get energy from external people. Introverts don't get that. They're drained by being around other people. And I'm talking, in the extremes, there's a lot in the middle as well. And so, but if you're an introvert trying to be an extrovert, you're going to be miserable because you're going to feel drained all the time. And you're going to be irritated by how you should be. And again, I'm making air quotes. And so, but once you know that you're an introvert, I'll never forget, I was in my 20s and I took my very first personality test for a job placement place. And they said, yeah, you're 95% introvert. And I said, what? And they said, yeah. And here's the other things that you are. And that changed everything for me because it was like, oh, this is why I like spending time alone. There's nothing wrong with that. This is why I get overwhelmed at parties and I shut down. And it was like, this was knowledge and this was power. And now what I do, ever since then, it's like I go to parties, hang out with people. I like people. I'm youngest of 8 kids. I like being around people. But I do it for like 10 or 15 minutes, and then I go out to smoke a cigarette and recharge, be by myself and recharge. Then I go back in and hang around people and be funny and do that. And then when I start to feel drained or a little irritated, I go out again. And so that knowledge and that acceptance was real power. And so know as much about yourself as you can. And with this air of, I'm okay no matter what. If I don't like people, if I only have 2 friends in the world, that's fine. Because those 2 friends are so precious to me. I don't have to have 50 friends, right? But I'm okay with that. A friend to all
is a friend to none.
Yeah. But if you're an extrovert and you do have 50 friends, have a great time. Go take them camping, right? If you're spontaneous and you don't like to plan things, you're fun to be around. But don't be a wedding planner because you're probably going to be really bad at it, right? So learn the things that you're really good at and that you love doing and that nurture you and that really give you satisfaction, and learn the things that you don't like. And just note those things. And just know that everybody's different and everyone is going to like different things. And everybody has their role. And for personality theory especially, I say this a lot. There's no good or bad personality traits, except for the dark, the dark triad. Machiavellianism, narcissism, and then antisocial personality, right? Those are horrible things. But there's the right fit for you. And the people that, the extroverts I don't worry about so much. The introverts, the person who's sitting in the back, who's so shy and doesn't want to speak up and stuff, I like to tell them, I totally understand. Say something whenever you're ready to say it. I'm not going to push you, but when you're ready, I will be listening, because it's probably going to be something, it could be something mundane, but it's going to be something important to you. And you should give people the respect and the dignity that all human beings deserve without as much expectation as possible. So you as students should go out and experience as much as you possibly can. And note the things that you like, that give you energy and make you feel like a good and whole and valued person, and note the things that don't. And don't do the things that you don't like to do, and do more of the things that you do like to do. And surround yourself with people that value you and understand you for being the person you are, and don't hang around assholes who don't like those things that you're not. You're just not going to convince them. You're not going to convert them. And that's okay. Let them go do their thing. You go do your thing, and it'll be
happy.
Yeah, it'll be smoother, at least.
And easier. It's easier to just be yourself than
It is easier to be yourself. But if you don't like yourself, if you don't accept yourself, if you think you should be something else, you're never gonna be there, because you're never gonna be enough.
So how do you learn how to accept yourself?
Well, some of it is dumb, repeated affirmations.
Why dumb? Don't you believe in affirmations?
They're cliches, right? I took an acting class when I was learning improv, and there's a lot of different acting techniques, but one of them is called Meisner, and it's named after, I forget the guy's first name, but his last name was Meisner. And I will never forget, the teacher came up and said, Meisner, first day of class, would always tell his students, "You are enough." I get a little choked up with this, but it's the idea that you don't have to conjure these things. We all have emotions. We've all felt things. We've had heartbreaks. We've had successes. And all those things are in you, and you are enough. All he was going to try and do as an acting teacher is help you bring that out on cue, which is hard. It's hard to do, right? And so, yeah, you are enough. You are enough. And so when I see other people's artwork, and I've seen other people's artwork in this room, it's like, that's an expression of you. And is everyone going to like it? No, but it's you. And that's the thing that makes it amazing. It's you. And that's all I want to see from my students, is you be you. But if you don't show it to anybody, we won't know what that is. So I try to encourage students, show us a little bit of who you are, right? And it's scary, but you have a lot of students around, your friends, and I think most of the students here actually want you to succeed. They'd want to see that stuff. And I've seen you in groups. I've gone to see plays in Amadeus and stuff. It's packed of people all wanting those people on stage to succeed. I've seen, TEDx talks. I've seen you give presentations. I've seen, Innovation Station. I've seen all these things. And you're always with a group of people that always want you to succeed, right? And it's very different from your high schools, I would imagine, who kind of wanted to tear you down.
Full of police, yeah.
Full of police. Fuck those guys.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's true. We shouldn't care about them.
Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
You gave a beautiful, elaborate answer. Now you mentioned...
Ending with, fuck those guys.
Yeah. Which made it even more beautiful, somehow.
Great.
You mentioned you, the importance of you. And it reminded me of your teaching method and grading method in I'm not sure if it's all of your psychology courses, but in Psych 101 is the CDQs, and you mentioned it's your favorite subject. You, how did you come up with this assignment? Why do you think it's important?
I mean, AUBG was my first teaching gig, and I kind of came in late, too late to even order textbooks, and so I sort of had to make up stuff. And I looked at other syllabi that were published online, and people had, and of course there are textbooks, and they all had, you give people canned questions. And I'll never forget my first semester. I kind of gave a lot of canned questions. I gave everybody the same questions, and there was a correct answer. And I just remember, this is so boring. This is so boring. I'm not learning anything about these students. And so there was some syllabi that I saw it could have been from DePaul, from an undergraduate class, and they called them critical thinking questions. And I liked the name, and I said, I've got students here from all over the world. Why don't I just ask them to give their viewpoints about these things? And sometimes we'll talk about cultural things. I just had an assignment in personality theory. What's a personality attribute that you think only exists in your culture? And it could be, you'll have to translate it, but tell me what those things are. So besa, which is an Albanian thing, which means honor and being trustworthy and honest. And that was a personality. And somebody says, he's got besa, right? And so all sorts of things. Bulgarians have a lot of interesting words. Mushmarok, which what's mushmarok? Or budala, right? Which you probably have the same sort of thing, which is like a very innocent but kind of dumb person. So those types of things. And so
you learned some very important things.
You learned really important things, right? And so
have you ever called somebody budala?
I have. I have. And so then it became interesting for me. And if I'm going to sit and grade 30 or 40 papers,
they might as well be
interesting, and you might as well be interested in writing it.
True.
So it worked well on both sides. And so when I tell students at the beginning of the semester, you're going to write 13 to 17 of these things, everyone's like, ugh, right?
But then once they start, you enjoy them.
And then when they start, they enjoy them. And when I started to get feedback, I love writing those things. It's like, great, I'm going to keep doing them.
Can you walk me through your teaching experience, and maybe walk me through all the jobs that you've had before teaching, and how you came about? Okay, this is going to be a big, juicy, complex question, so try to bear with me.
Okay.
I want to know, where did you go to an undergraduate school? And then how your first job, you mentioned you worked for 20 years in IT and then an investment bank. You mentioned before we started recording that you were a sound engineer, and then psychology and teaching.
Yeah, so
tell me all about it.
Yeah, so I've had a very twisty, winding road to get here, and I don't recommend it. If you can get your job, if you can get your life right the first time, that's probably better. But I mean, if there's been a story in my life, it's been reinvention.
Isn't that better, though? Isn't that more exciting than just getting it right the first time?
Is it more exciting? Yes. Do I wish that I got it right, in my 20s? Yeah. So I started off, I'm the youngest of 8 kids. I didn't go to university right after. I worked as a sound guy for a touring band, local touring bands in Chicago. So I had the sound equipment. My brother did the lights. My next older brother did lights and concert lighting. And so we were sort of a package deal. So we got hired by local bands, and we had a big truck. And so we would do live gigs for mostly rock bands, some funk bands, in the Chicago area, and it was enough to make a living, but it's expensive. And at the time, where we didn't, speakers were big and heavy, and the amps were big and heavy and stuff, it was a lot of hard work. So I did that for 4 years, driving a truck, touring with bands, setting up sound systems, but it was fun. And I got to do sound for The plasmatics? Do you know who the plasmatics are? Of course you don't know.
Of course we do.
Of course you don't know who the
big.
plasmatics are. The plasmatics was headlined by a woman named Wendy O. Williams. It was a punk band, and all she wore was black electrical tape.
Scandalous.
It was very scandalous in the 80s, right? And so, but that got to be a drag. And so I worked as a truck driver for auto parts, and all my friends had gone and graduated from university, and so I decided this sucks. I need to get a job. So I went back. Joliet Junior College I got a 2-year associate's degree in computer science, and I got a job at the biggest employer in the region at the time, which was Bell Labs. It was a part of AT&T, and I worked as a software designer and a software tester, and I was bored out of my mind. It was. Has anyone here seen Severance? Severance is a Apple TV show. It came out last year. It was one of the best TV shows from last year, and it's all about sort of oppressive corporate environments. And I remember watching the first couple episodes, and I messaged my friends who I used to work with, and I said, "You got to watch this. This is great." Turns out they filmed at Bell Labs in New Jersey. They just took got the people out, but they used the sets exactly how it was. I did that for a few years, working in these large corporate environments, and I said, "Oh my God, this sucks." But I do like technology. And I got a wind of a job at an investment bank in 1991, and I interviewed them, and they were in downtown Chicago. I was breaking up with my girlfriend at the time, and I wanted to move from the suburbs into downtown Chicago. And these guys liked me, and I liked them, and I said, I learned something very important. This is long before improv. I said, I would love this job, and I would work my ass off if I got this job. Can I please have it? And they said, no one has ever asked for the job before. We've interviewed about 20 people, but no one has asked for the job. And I said, I would love this job, and I will do whatever it takes to be successful here. And I meant it, because I wanted that job, and they looked really cool, and they gave me the job. And it was the best job I ever had.
What did you do?
For the first 3 years, I was software librarian, basically quality control, making sure that all these software developers who wrote software for the investment bank, proprietary derivative software, that it was managed on time, that I built things that went on into production, and that it was all about quality control and all that. And I loved it. Very, very quick, in responding to people very, very quickly in their needs. And I liked it a lot. And then they sort of formed a different group within the bank to do sort of entrepreneurial design. And since everybody had to go through me, all the tech people had to go through me in the first 3 years, they all got to know me. And this one guy said, I want you to be my aide-de-camp, my second in command for this new group. And I want you to hire people for this group. And I said, okay, I have no HR background. He says, I think you know exactly what we're looking for. And I said, yeah, if I had to hire people, they need to have 3 things. They need to be extremely smart and know how to do the job. They need to have a great work ethic, number 2, and we would want to share an office with them. And if they don't have one of those, we don't hire them. If they have all 3, we hire them. And he says, that's perfect. And I hired like 150 people over the next 7 years there. And because it's an investment bank, you make a lot of money. And it was great. And it was all about honesty. It was all about, we would have meetings, and the guy who was called to the meeting to say, great, why are we here? How long is this going to take? And what do you want to get out of this meeting? And we would do meetings that would last 10 minutes. And we'd get all that done and out. And it was great. It was all about performance. It was by far the most meritocratic place I ever worked at. So that I consider that career number 3.
So then what happened if you enjoyed it this much?
I got burnt out.
Oh.
I got super burnt out. 10 years in an investment bank in IT, I just got super burnt out. And I asked them, I would like to take a 3-month leave of absence. I want to travel. This is 2001. They said, we don't do 3-month leave of absence. We only do 6 months. You've been here 10 years. Why don't you just quit? We'll give you a severance package. We'll give you X amount of dollars for every year you've been here, and go do it. And if you want to come back, just come back. And I said, great. I quit my job, and I did a 3-month tour of Russia and Ukraine because it was a part of the world that I'd always wanted to visit. And I thought it would be interesting. And it turns out it was really interesting. I really loved Russia. I really loved Ukraine. I really loved the culture. I loved seeing. In 2001, it was still it was going from those really awful period in the 1990s to something a little bit more stable and prosperous in the early 2000s. And there was a little feeling of optimism that was happening. And it was just so interesting. And instead of doing it for 3 months or 6 months, I did it for 2 years.
Wow.
And just kind of traveled all over the region. But I only had a 2-year degree. And I came back to the United States, and I had a friend of mine, and he said, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. He says, you've always complained about being insecure. You're a smart guy, but you've only got a 2-year degree. Why don't you go back and get your bachelor's? And I said, but what subject? And he says, what's the only thing that interests you? And I said, people. He says, that kind of says psychology. So I went back and I got finished my bachelor's degree in psychology, and one of those instructors, here's something very important, students, to keep in mind. If you have an instructor who sort of changed your life, tell them.
Tell them.
Because I had an instructor in this undergrad and she said, I think you should be a psychologist. I think you should go and get your Ph.D. in psychology. And I said, great, what's a Ph.D.? And she said, it's graduate degree, and you do original research and so on. And so I'm in contact with her, and I wrote to her and I said, you were the first person to tell me to go get my Ph.D. And my whole life is different because of you. And she's great. And so that's how I started to study social psychology at University of Illinois Chicago. Got a C in stats and got put on academic probation. And they gave me 2 semesters to get out of academic probation. And you had to get a B average. And I missed it by 4/100ths of a GPA. And they said, nope, we have to cut you. And I said, okay. But in the meantime, I learned about community psychology at DePaul University. Mm-hmm. And I started going, and the guy who became my advisor, Dr. Lenny Jason, who, again, I'm still in contact with, he had these meetings about Oxford houses, which are addiction recovery homes. And I started just going to these things. I wasn't a student, wasn't a part of his research team, but I wrote to him and I said, hey, I understand you study mutual help groups. He said, yeah, just come to these meetings. They're at this time. And I applied at DePaul, and he said, okay, how are you not going to fail at stats again? I said, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And if you give me this chance, I will get an A in stats. And he did. He gave me a chance, and I got into the PhD program at DePaul, did very, very well. And then one of my fellow students, in every summer, sorry, this is a kind of a long-winded answer to your question. So every summer, while I was in grad school, starting in social psychology, I would go to different places in Eastern Europe. And the year I started at DePaul, I just had on my list, I'm going to Bulgaria, I'm going to Romania, I'm going to Moldova, and I'm going to Budapest. And my advisor said, the program officer for our grant, our big research grant, just came back from Bulgaria. And I said, can I write to this guy? And he said, sure. So I wrote to this guy. This was in 2007, my first year. Bulgaria had just become part of the European Union. And this guy, who was part of the government, the United States government, the National Institutes of Health, his partner was Bulgarian, and he was brought into Bulgaria to give them advice on how to modernize their addiction treatment infrastructure. And I said, hey, I'm going to Bulgaria on holiday. Can I do anything? Can I meet these people? And he said, yeah, I'll put you in contact with the people that I work with at the National Institute of Addictions. And so I did, and I met with them, and they said, what are you going to study? And I said, I'm studying Oxford houses. They're like recovery homes. What do you have these here? No. Would it be interesting to have them here? We don't know, but it would be, we sure need them. And so when I came back and did grad work, every single paper I wrote about was about what could these work in Bulgaria. And then a friend of mine, a colleague, who I've since thanked very much, he said, you should apply for a Fulbright. I said, great, what's a Fulbright? It's a grant to go study abroad and do research. And so I applied for a Fulbright while I was in grad school, and I got a Fulbright to come to Bulgaria the first time I was here. It was in 2009 and 2010. Met a lot of great, amazing Bulgarians. At the time, the program was very, very small, the Fulbright in Bulgaria. Now it's gigantic. And then came back to the U.S., finished my Ph.D., came back as a Fulbright scholar in 2016, continued this research, and I talk about this in some of my classes, and that's when I got the job here at AUBG. Because I met, and by this time I had taken improv classes, and I knew
how to be likable.
Well, I knew how to pay attention to people. And so at the time, you did not have a psychology program. And I was involved in Fulbright, and I looked at the program for this Fulbright event, and the president of AUBG was going to be giving the awards. And I said, I'm going to go, and I'm going to ask this person why they don't have a psychology program at this amazing liberal arts university. And I did. And he said, well, we're thinking about creating one. Are you free? And I said, well, yes, I am. And sent in my CV, and the rest, as they say, is history.
And the rest is a psychology major at AUBG.
Yeah. And I mean, people here, I was the only psychology professor in a long time. Dean White and the provost at the time said, could you please write the proposal to create the psychology program, and went through the curriculum committee, got a lot of input, and that's how it got started. Wow. So to tie it all back to improv, here's a little quiz for you.
Oh,
Fiona, no. What is the first rule of improv? Yes.
Yes, and.
Yes, and.
And paying attention, and using what you have, using what you see.
Paying attention, mindfulness out loud, and seeing what people...
Reacting to what you have.
Reacting to what you have, seeing what people need, and seeing if you can fill a niche. See how you can be helpful. The thing I learned at the investment bank is, it was a couple things. Being honest about everything was very, very important. The other thing was, what can we do to help? How can we help you succeed? What do you need? And if you tell us, well, I may not have it, but I know somebody who does, and I'll put you in connection with them. Help, 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 help. Don't be a dead end, ever. And, just don't say no. Because if you ask me something and I say no, it stops. And you have to go find it with somebody else. But people have asked me, do you have this expertise? No, but I know someone who does. And let me hook you up with them. And just today, when I was grading your paper in Psych 101.
Which got 5 out of 5, by the way.
Got 5 out of 5, by the way. Myelin sheaths. It reminded me.
And different types of brain scans.
It reminded me, there was a professor at DePaul, and he was a pretty senior professor, very energetic guy. And we had a teaching seminar with him. This is a long time ago. This is like 2009, 2010. And he says, I love teaching Psych 101. And I said, really? He goes, yes, I love teaching Psych 101. So today, as I'm grading your paper, Tiona, I wrote to him and I said, hey, I just want to let you know, I think about you all the time when I'm doing Psych 101, and I'll never forget how much you said you loved it. And I never forgot that. And I was skeptical, but you know what? Psych 101 is my most favorite class to teach right now. And I want to thank you for that. And here's what he wrote back today. Just read the first line.
Wow. Hi, Ron. Wow. Thanks in capital letters. I follow your postings on Improv on Facebook. They are clever. I did see your message this morning, but glad you wrote an email because I'm not a messenger user, etc., etc., etc. Wow, so I'm the reason why somebody's day got better and you reconnected with somebody who you
Connections
look
to
up to?
connections to connections to connections.
Wow.
But you have to share it. You have to tell people. And if you don't tell people, if it just lives up here, and I'm pointing to my head, it doesn't go anyplace. And so you have to take a little bit of a risk. And if my life has been a message to anybody about anything, I've had lots of failures and heartbreaks and stuff like that, but I've had way more successes by trying things and failing and trying again and failing and trying again. And if I didn't fail, if I didn't get a C in stats, I would be a miserable social psychologist, probably. But I got a C in stats and I got kicked out, which forced me to learn about community psychology, which got me into Fulbright, which got me in listening to people, what they told me, and saying, really, yes? And what can I do about that? And there's lots of people that helped me. And I asked for help, and they gave me help. But always ask for help. Always be willing to pay attention to what's going on around you. Always be willing to say yes, not to have people walk all over you. Because if somebody's an asshole and they're taking advantage of you, you're totally obliged to say no. But I've had assholes in my life. And
how do you deal with them?
They're not in my life anymore.
Simple.
You know, I don't feed those monsters. And that's how monsters get big. You feed them. And, you know, if there's an asshole in your life, just stay away from them as much as you possibly can. Or if you can't get away with them, minimize the amount of time that you have to spend with them. Give them as little food as possible. And then when you're not going to be with them forever, and when you're done with them, get away. And be with the people that really do nurture you, that really love you, that really appreciate who you are, that laugh at your dumb jokes. Right?
I got plenty of those. Dumb jokes, I mean.
Me too. Say a dumb joke.
Oh my God, I just... Okay. This is a pretty dark one.
Okay.
Is it okay?
I'll tell you a gross one.
Okay. So, let's imagine that we pass by a cemetery.
Okay.
And I'm asking you to guess, how many people do you think are dead here?
Oh.
You know that one?
I do. It's a great punchline.
Say a number.
I don't know, 200 or 300?
No, it's all of them.
Why?
Give me one.
Continue with this theme. Why are there fences around cemeteries?
Why?
Because people are dying to get in.
Good job.
Nice job.
Loved it. Loved it.
These are dad jokes.
Yeah, that's my type of humor. And honestly, I always get this face. Teona.
But inside,
they know they like it. They know
laughing.
they like it.
Look at these people. They're laughing. They're
exactly.
They can't. They're trying to hold it in to not bleed into the other microphones. Right? They're very funny jokes.
I don't want any other type of jokes. Or wait, let me remember this one. How do you call cheese that's not yours?
I don't know.
Nacho cheese. Thank you so much for being a delightful guest.
Thank you for having me.
Delightful conversation.
This is a great conversation. I enjoyed it very much.
I enjoyed it too, sincerely. And thank you very much, listeners, for also devoting your time to listen to a very cool professor and a very cool student.
That would be Professor Clark, who's going to be the next guest.
Thank you, and see you in the next episode with, well, you gave it away, Professor Bill William Clark.
Bill William Clark. Bill, he's great.